Hi, and welcome to a special edition of the Virtual Book Festival held in March 26th of 2020. This is produced by Book Festival Network, a division of Dear Texas and Dear Indy. This show is sponsored by Authors Marketing Guild. We're a membership-owned company that helps authors learn how to market and sell themselves. Also by IndieLector.store, the only bookstore that offers up to 80% of its sales to authors directly. And produced by Dear Indy and Dear Texas, where we drop everything and read both Texas and Indy authors. This episode introduces Joe Kilgore to our audience.
In fact, I want to thank Alan very much for putting on this show this evening, and I certainly want to thank everyone who is taking time to tune in. There must be at least 2 or 3 of you around the world who are hearing this, so it's good because we don't always get to talk directly to the people that we write for, our audiences, and it's actually a pleasure to do so. Just a little background on me, so you'll know something about who's doing all the talking here. My name is Joe Kilgore. I live and write in Austin, Texas. For the first part of my career, I was in the advertising business and wrote and produced a lot of radio and television and print and outdoor advertising for very large companies. And then I got into fiction, although a lot of people think there's really not much difference between the two, but there is a little bit. And I want to try my hand at that. And so for the past few years, I've been writing novels and novellas and short stories. Had about 25 short stories published, 4 different novels and 1 novella. Many of them have won awards. I recently had a short story selected by the Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library, and I was very proud of that because they're a prestigious organization. And of the different books that I've written, the 4 different novels that I've written, I was going to talk to you tonight about one of them, which was, I don't know if you can see this or not, A Farmhouse in the Rain. It's a World War II novel, and it's a big book, a little over 400 pages, and it's really a sort of a story of not just war and peace, but also crime and punishment, love and loss, eventually hope. It's really a story of 3 different individual American soldiers, one from a small town in Texas, another from the city of Chicago, and a third from Los Angeles. And it's all about what happens to them both during the war and after the war. But the title, A Farmhouse in the Rain, is really based on an event that sort of happens in the middle of the book. It's kind of the fulcrum that the whole book turns on. The 3 soldiers are separated from their unit, and they wind up spending the night in the home of a French woman. And the following morning, when they get up to leave, the French woman is dead. And as there appeared to be no one else there other than the 3 soldiers, it becomes a bit of a murder mystery as to what happened to the woman, what transpired. The book goes on through the war and also into their lives after the war, and what happens both to them and to the women that they love and wound up leaving behind to go fight. In fact, much of the book itself takes place on the home front as well as on the battlefield. So it covers a very broad area. Gotten some very good reviews for the book. A lot of us are sometimes hesitant to blow our own horn, but somebody's got to do it. So let me just read you a couple. The U.S. review said, Kilgore's penned a well-written book with an almost Shakespearean feel to it, filled with suspense, sacrifice, and subplots that interlock smoothly. The author's dark chronicle of lives bound together by fate is a solid addition to the World War II thriller genre. Pacific Book Review said, with a sophisticated storyline and characters that bring it to life, A Farmhouse in the Rain is a well-mapped, well-managed mystery. At every moment in this romance and action-laden mystery, you know that capable hands are at the wheel. A literary group called International Writers Inspiring Change said this: a taunting and compelling read, unquestionably a 5-star piece of writing. It is a novel that has it all, appealing to the human spirit on every level. Well, I hope they know what they're talking about. But anyway, it was interesting to write, and it's a book I think if you like big books with big sweeping stories, I think you'll enjoy it. The other books that I've written to this point, in fact, my latest is it's actually a novella. It's called The Horse Killer, and it's a Western mystery that actually won first place in the Texas Authors Association for Best Action Adventure. While it is sort of a classic Western, it does have a mystery at its core, and I think a lot of people will be surprised at how that particular book turns out. It's also done very well. In fact, I recently written a screenplay based on the novella, and the screenplay won an award in a Los Angeles competition for best initial screenplays. So the other couple of books that I wanted to mention was one called Sin and Sombreros, which is sort of a gumshoe novel about a San Diego detective who gets caught up in some things south of the border. And he has a wild time of his own, trying to extricate himself from battles not only with Zapatista rebels and weird family situations, but also with his friends who get him into more trouble than he generally gets into by himself. And then the initial book that I wrote, which is still available, it's still very interesting, it's called The Blunder, which is in fact sort of it's a book about a man who makes his own trouble. In fact, the epigraph of the book says, within every smart man, a stupid one lies in wait, which is certainly something that I found to be true. Each of these books, as the authors mentioned earlier, are all available on Indie Lecture. They can all be found there, and you know, like most books in the world today, you can find them on Amazon as well. But check them out on Indie Lecture if you can. Just to give you a small sample for what some of them feel like, I will read you a short piece from A Farmhouse in the Rain. This is actually the prologue that begins the novel. And it starts at the top and sets the location as near Flamanville, France, 1944. And it says this: his right arm hung useless at his side. Rivulets of blood had dried on the back of his hand and along his fingers, but he had lost no strength in his other limb. With his good hand, he pulled the gag from the boy's mouth, then slipped the blindfold from his eyes. Vos, he said, and the boy turned so the man could untie his hands. Venez avec moi, the man commanded, and the boy followed him up the short flight of stairs and into the room. Then the man gripped his shoulder lightly and guided him toward the closed door. The boy's heart was pounding like a boxer's jab, threatening at any moment to punch its way through his sunken chest. Ouvrez-le, the man said. So the boy reached up slowly, grasped the knob, turned it, and pushed the door open. The squeak of the hinge momentarily diverted his attention, but did not hold it. The boy's eyes cut immediately to the bed, where the blankets had been pulled all the way up, covering some sort of lump beneath it. Still with his hand on the boy's shoulder, the man walked him to the edge of the bed. There, he removed his hand and pulled the blankets away. The boy gasped, and the man grabbed him again, holding him firm and making him stare at the nude woman on the bed. The blue scarf that had choked the life from her was still wrapped tightly around her throat. The boy had never seen his mother naked. He tried to gaze on the parts that had always been hidden to him, rather than focusing on her white lips, blood-stained nose, and still open eyes. But the man was intent upon the boy seeing her face frozen in its death mask. He walked the boy closer, pointed to her throat, drew his finger across his own, and said, "Americans, Americans." The boy nodded his head as if he understood. When the man had gone, the boy went back in the bedroom. He opened the top drawer of the dresser, reached in as far as he could, and pulled out a framed photograph. It was a picture of his mother and father in Paris. She often showed it to him and told him it was taken the afternoon before the evening he was conceived. He wasn't sure what conceived meant precisely, but he knew it always made his mother smile each time she shared the picture and the story with him. Then he went and sat beside his mother on the bed. He sat there for hours, sat there staring as her head and neck turned turquoise, sat there as blisters began to form and fluids began to leak, sat there as her body began to bloat and swell, sat there as the pungent odor of rotting meat began to fill the tiny room. And all the while he sat, he would look back and forth from the decaying corpse to the photograph in his hands and marvel at how one could become the other. He was still sitting there when the men found him, men in uniforms who let him keep his photograph but took him from his house, men who spoke words he could not understand, men whom the man with one good arm had branded as his mother's murderers, les Americans. So that's the prologue from A Farmhouse in the Rain, and then gets into the story itself. It's sort of, I guess if you think about it overall, as I thought about when I was doing it, it was sort of in the vein of Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead, or Irwin Shaw's The Young Lions, trying to come at things from sort of a big overall perspective. And I hope that it works, or at least works for some people who've read it. I think they've enjoyed it.
Joe, we have
yes.
a couple questions here. One, you have another book called Horse Killer, which somebody really enjoys. But they also want to know, since you have such a vivid collection of books, how do you get all this imagination and creative flow going?
It comes from being very old. I've lived a lot of years and read an awful lot of books and watched an awful lot of films and television and whatnot. And even even certainly in my first career in advertising, you have to be able to pull in an awful lot of knowledge and sort of condense it into something that comes back out as an interesting bit of information in story form more often than not. So that helped a great deal in doing that. But the areas that I've gone into, World War II in one area, a Western in another area, the detective novel, the sort of contemporary piece. Those are all areas that have always fascinated me. And the World War II era in particular, I really wanted to write that book because I felt it was one of the last few times that we were all really together as a country. We were sort of all pulling in the same direction, as opposed to everyone having exactly the opposite opinion of everyone else. So it was interesting to take it from that perspective. Although a lot of people don't realize, though, that even in World War II, there were quite a few differences of agreement as well. In fact, the total number of soldiers in World War II were really only 1/3 volunteers, and 2/3 were conscripted or drafted into the service at that time. So people look back on it fondly as the kind of area where everyone was sort of on the same page. But there were still an awful lot of people who were not in a hurry to go in harm's way, though quite a few were, and obviously quite a few did, and we're very indebted to all of them. Do you have another question, Alan?
We have just about a minute left, and somebody wanted to know something about Horse Killer.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, the Horse Killer is about a Texas Ranger who comes upon, he's actually chasing a bandit. He catches the bandit and bringing the bandit back to where he's trying to get him to. Comes upon a horse who has been savagely beaten, just the body of the horse he finds. And then when he gets the other fellow back in town, he realizes, he hears that another white horse, as that one was a white horse, has been shot in another town. And he immediately starts to sort of put aside all his other duties because he feels like there's really something strange going on here. And if he doesn't stop these horse killings, perhaps no one else will. And then when a third horse is started ritualistically slain, he definitely devotes himself to finding the killer. And so he takes an arduous journey. A lot of suspects are sort of eliminated along the way. And he eventually has a violent confrontation with who he thinks is the killer. Now, is it really the killer or not? Well, I guess one has to read the book to find that out. But that was part of the fun in making this very sort of classic Western, both sort of a classic mystery as well.
Authors Marketing Guild is a membership-owned organization designed to help authors succeed and learn how to better market and sell themselves and their books. Join us at authorsmarketingguild.com and receive so many benefits you'll wonder why you didn't join sooner. That's authorsmarketingguild.com.
Welcome to IndieLector.store, an online bookstore where the discriminating reader can find award-winning books. IndieLector.store is not a big corporation, so we can give up to 80% of the sales directly to the author. Help us support them by buying a great book at IndieLector.store. The 5th Annual Authors Marketing Event. 2 days of live seminars in marketing for authors. The only organization that certifies authors in marketing. Live and free to the first 100 authors registered. Sponsored by Bubblish, empowering authorpreneurs, and Indie Lector Store, paying authors for their fair share. Head to www.2020.authorsmarketingguild.com today.